Good evening, everyone. Welcome to COS Indiana Live 2022. My name is Dale Parrish. I am the State Director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And once again, I want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. Kind of feels like I've been away for a little while. We broadcast a best of on Memorial Day. So we weren't there with you in person on that day. So I'm back here now for June 6th. And now normally I would have my co-host with me, Ken Kashuba, our state communications coordinator. But tonight, Ken's got this funny thing. He wants to work for a living, you know. So Ken's a videographer by trade, and has still, he is retired, but he does have a ongoing business, and he's doing a shoot tonight. So he will not be with me. And as a matter of fact, he's got another shoot lined up for next Monday evening. So he won't be with us next Monday as well. So we'll get by as best we can without Ken tonight. Now, of course, Ken's role has always been to monitor the viewer comments and questions. So I will do my best to take care of that. Now, something else, though, that Ken normally does, and I'll cover that here briefly, but Ken also conducted the polling, the viewer polling that we normally do as part of our broadcast. So we're not going to be doing that tonight or next week. So, Ken's kind of got a lock on doing the polling. So rather than try to, for me to try and do that, we'll just forego that particular exercise for right now. So we have a super program lined up for you this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy it, as well as next week. And I'll be getting into that very shortly. So let's go ahead here. And just to let you know, this broadcast tonight is number 152. We've been doing this since late 2018. So we're keeping track now. I discovered, quite honestly, a few weeks ago when I sat down and added up all the broadcasts that we'd done, and to my surprise, we were almost to 150. And I thought, hey, I'm going to keep track of this from now on. So that's what I'm doing. So every broadcast that we do, we're going to indicate what number it is. So as I said, tonight is number 152 and counting. And hopefully we will be doing hundreds more before I hang up my hat on this. So, okay. I see I'm already getting a few comments, and I want to show those as we go along here. Matthew Zale, thanks from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Matthew's one of our newer viewers, so glad to have you on tonight, Matthew. Dale Tipton, Region Captain up in Region 1. Greetings from Region 1, where constitutional rights are absolute. All right. Good. And Jerry Rowe, one of our internet systems analysts. Good morning, cowboys, farmers, and production workers from the Great Plains of Indiana and beyond. So Glad to have you tonight, Jerry. Thanks for tuning in. All right, let's get back now to what I was going to be talking about. I wanted to tell you that coming up, we have the roundtable coming up on June 27th. Now, the roundtable is a little different format. We do this on the fourth Monday of every evening or every month. We just dedicate the whole broadcast, like we're doing tonight on the fourth Monday. We dedicate it to a roundtable discussion of current issues and topics. So we've been getting a great response on this. So please make note of that. On the next one coming up is June 27th. Also, make note, our national website, conventionofstates.com. That's where, if you want to become a supporter for Convention of States, that's the first step that you need to take, is go to this national website, conventionofstates.com, and sign in and become a supporter. That's a very important step. All right. Now, also want to make you aware that anything we say tonight or do, if it stirs any questions or comments after the broadcast is over, you can email us at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. And I'll try my best to run that across the screen here again before we sign off tonight. All right. Well, this year, we've been following the theme of what action can I take by joining Convention of States. See, activism is very important to what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop an army nationally of activists, as well as, of course, here in Indiana. So what we've been focusing on this year is, how can you do that? How can you express your activism through Convention of States? And we've explored many different opportunities that we can offer you to do that. And we have more to cover with you. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you right now, what we have lined up next week is a gentleman. He's the state director in Arizona, and he's very much into becoming a constitutional coach. Now, and we have some individuals here in Indiana that are performing that role. And so he's going to come on and tell you all about how, if you're interested in doing that, he's going to tell you what that involves and how to go about becoming a constitutional coach. I mean, that is another way of expressing your activism through Convention of States. So, and there are many other ways. We've talked about how you can taking on a leadership role, attending rallies, telepatriot, all sorts of other opportunities available to you through Convention of States. So next week, we're going to be talking about becoming a constitutional coach. Now, tonight, we're going to be talking about a concept that is I call it one of the pillars of our resolution in Convention of States that we're trying to get 34 states to sign on to, calling for a Convention of States to address 3 different areas. And I refer to these 3 areas as pillars. One being term limits for Congress, as well as the judiciary and other federal officials, reining in the breadth and control of the federal government, and addressing the national debt. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is the national debt. And we have 2 great people coming on tonight to talk to us about this. And we have Debbie Stewart, our constitutional expert, and Gary Harbaugh, one of our executive group members, and we're going to be discussing the national debt. And Debbie's going to kind of take it from a constitutional standpoint, and Gary is going to discuss it with regard to its effects upon our economy and growth. So ought to be interesting, and we'll kind of conduct it as a panel discussion, because I'm going to stay on and be involved. So we'll all three be on at the same time, and we'll talk about this very, very important topic. Once again, that dealing with the national debt is so very, very important, as you're going to understand and hear when these two individuals speak about this. But once again, this is one of our main pillars in our resolution that we want to see addressed in the form of proposing amendments to the Constitution that would deal with the national debt. Folks, I mean, if you follow this at all, you know the national debt continues to go up and up and up. And I've been around long enough to have seen this grow to unimaginable levels. I can clearly remember when our national debt was under $5 trillion, and even before that. But that's about the time when I started paying attention to things nationally, and every year it just goes up and up and up and up. Doesn't make any difference which administration's in control. Doesn't make any difference. It continues to go up and up. So with that said, then that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, time permitting, and we're going to make time for this tonight. We're going to do a contributor segment, the Lion Truth, from one of our individuals, Rick Lyon, and he's going to talk about the war on religion. We've been trying to get this contributor segment featured on a number of our recent broadcasts, and we always run out of time. So I promised Rick we would get this on tonight regardless. So we'll be sure and get this on the contributor segment after we talk about the national debt. So without further ado, let me once again, let's talk about what we're going to be doing here. And again, we're talking about convention states and activism, and how you can become part of convention of states and express that activism through convention of states. So let me bring on Debbie and Gary, and let's get started on this. We'll bring on the beauty first, okay? That's you, Debbie.
I thought you were going to Gary up.
I thought that did run across my mind, but I thought, no, I better not.
He is a beauty, though.
Yeah, he's a beauty. All right. All right. Speaking of beauty here, there's Mr. Gary Harbaugh.
Thanks, you liars. Glad to be here. This somewhat depressing topic.
Well, it is, I guess, to some extent. I should have modified this particular banner, Gary, but again, we're going to be talking about the national debt, and Debbie's going to talk to us from a constitutional standpoint, and you're going to be talking to us from the standpoint of our economy. So,
right.
Debbie, I'm sure a national debt like we have is purely permissible in our Constitution, right? I mean, it's okay that we do that, right?
I would have to say, no.
No? Okay. Well, I kind of thought maybe you might have something to say about it.
Yes.
So, Debbie, why don't you lead us off here and talk about our national debt and the Constitution.
Okay, thanks. And, I do want to say something up front, because I feel like so many people believe that, well, when the government gives you money, well, that's great. They pay for your college or whatever. But everybody needs to remember the government doesn't generate income. Anything that they do, any money they give us, almost all of it comes from us or either borrowing from other nations. So when you hear your college is getting paid, maybe, but your taxes are all going to go up to pay for that college education. So you're still paying for it. It's just you're going to write the check to somebody different, maybe.
Debbie. I've heard it said in talking about the gun issues and the terrible things that have happened recently with, like in Texas, with I've heard it said we could put armed guards in all the schools, and I've heard them say we've got the money. We it's left over from legislation that was passed before. We got the money, and I'm thinking it's not our money. It's borrowed money. Yes, we do have money, but it was created. And borrowed. Obviously, that would be. I mean, putting armed guards in schools, I think, is a worthwhile objective.
Yeah.
But the fact saying that we got the money is not. I don't think is quite right to say that. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're great. And nobody would run their home financials the way our country's doing. We'd all have gone under by now. So basically what we are not only enslaving ourselves, but our future generations. And we're going to talk about why it's not unconstitutional, or why it's unconstitutional, because we are guaranteed a Republican form of government in Article 4 of our Constitution. And in order to guarantee a Republican form of government, what does that mean? That means we have elected representatives who get to make decisions for the people that they serve. But it's not fair to make a decision for me, but it affects the next generation down, and they end up having to pay for it. They incur the debt that I want right now, which is what's happening. But one of the things I wanted to mention, though, is that, a lot of people are like, well, just tax people more. No. If we took the top 100 billionaires in America and we put all their wealth together, it would be less than 5% of what we owe. And that was years ago. I mean, that's not even the current figure. That was back when it was about 20 trillion, not 30 trillion on the U.S. debt clock, which Gary's going to cover here in a little bit. And so the key is we have to cut spending. That is the key to getting fiscally responsible. But you can't do that if you don't elect the people who are willing to draw a line in the sand and not spend all this money. And so it's very interesting because if you ask a lot of the senators and congressmen in our nation, they all know that it's enslaving the next generation, but they still do it. They're still doing it. And so why is that? What is it that keeps them doing it? Well, think about the entitlement programs that we have. They give money towards certain groups of people, knowing that group of people is going to vote them back in. And so find a senator, find a congressman who's willing to take the risk of not being voted back in by cutting off spending to certain groups, right? And so we run into, I'll give you something if you give back to me. And so entitlements are about 50% of our national debt, our entitlement programs. And we've got other things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all those things where, people are getting money now, but they're going to be charged for it with their kids or their grandkids are the ones that are going to end up paying for it. It's a super sad situation. And I can remember presidential debates from years ago where they were talking about, I'm going to clean up Social Security and I'm going to do all these things. And nobody wants to do that because that would be huge.
I think Social Security, isn't that scheduled to go broke? What is it, in the next 10 years or 15 years? Do you know, Gary?
I think it's in the next 10 years. The Old Age and Survivors Benefit Fund will be, all the reserves will be spent. We'll talk about what that really amounts to. And I think Medicare is even sooner than that.
Yeah.
So it means either raising taxes, payroll tax, which nobody wants to do, or cutting benefits, which nobody wants to do. So.
Yeah, somebody needs to take a look at where we're spending money and really draw some serious lines, which is why Convention of States is so important, because we want to get an amendment around fiscal responsibility. But if you just look at the comparison of the debt, like in the year 1929, our national debt was 17 billion. Okay, that's 9 zeros, right? So in 1929, 17 billion. In the year 2000, 5.6 trillion, and that's 330 times as high as what it was in 1929. Now this year in 2022 at 30 trillion, we're 1,764 times the amount in 1929. So we've just taken on this attitude where we just borrow, whether we need it or not, whether it's really important or not. There are some things, like if your military is really hurting and you want to defend yourself, that might be a priority where you borrow some money, to do something for your military because you don't want to be taken over. But some of the programs we're doing now that have nothing to do with our nation and its defense and its prosperity. It's about catering to certain groups on certain objectives that they have. So, but like I said, or you could okay, so the 100 wealthiest people, billionaires, wouldn't work. But if you taxed all of the Americans, if you took all the money Americans have and you took all their property, it still wouldn't pay off the national debt of every citizen here in the country. So the only way we can do this is to cut spending. That's it. One solution.
You remember Senator Tom Coburn was a big supporter of Convention of States, passed away here a year or so ago. He was one of those individuals that every year he put out a report, didn't he, on, I can't remember what it was called, but a report on wasteful spending by the federal government. And I just wonder if anything was ever done with all those examples that he, year after year, that he uncovered, and I think he would write a book, I believe, every year on all the wasteful spending, and that's where that's where you become aware of some of these programs that money has gone to that you think are so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know, Gary, was any of those ever addressed?
I doubt it. Every dollar of federal spending creates a constituency. So somebody is receiving that money, and if you threaten to cut it off, they're going to scream bloody murder and probably appear on the evening news. We're balancing the budget on the backs of these poor souls. And so it's extremely hard to cut spending. And that's why we need the Convention of States that puts a limit on spending so that Congress can't just willy-nilly spend. Some so-called economists have come up with this thing they call modern monetary theory, which is, hey, you could just print as much money as you need. Well, that's nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, Debbie, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt again.
No, not at all. Okay, so we know that the entitlement programs are basically designed to buy the votes of those who receive them. And that has caused a lot of problems because nobody wants backlash at the ballot box. So we're catering to these groups, and we're spending, like I said, over half of our federal spending is entitlement programs, which is huge. So if you just had somebody take a look at all of the entitlements and knocked a lot of those out, that would be a huge way to cut spending. But just to give you an idea, so right now, I think we said 30 million, right, on the debt clock is about what they're saying the debt is. 30 trillion, sorry, 30 trillion, yeah. So if we were to just take $1 trillion, just to give you an idea, and we laid those $1 bills, a trillion of them, from end to end, they would wrap around the earth 3,800 times. That's 1 trillion. That's
just
six-
1 trillion. That's
That's
just
just 1 trillion. Yeah, and that's 12 zeros on the back for a trillion. So that is a lot of money. It would take 1,940 years to spend 17 trillion if you spend $1 million a day. So it's just unbelievable how much money we have that we owe.
Well,
So the
listen,
question-
we got some comments here. Some people are, and one of our region captains, Thomas Schultz, is really, we struck a chord with Thomas here. So hold on. Okay. Thomas Schultz, put God back into the family. I tell you, I think that's a good point. And I think Thomas said 2034. That's probably one of the programs we talked about that is going to be going broke here in the near future. That may be Social Security that he's referring to. And he's also saying slowly cut Social Security as people pass away. Do not replace them. So very, very interesting. And here's one from Scott Goldsberry. Seizure of George Soros money laundering operations would do the same thing. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay. I just thought I would.
Great comments.
David Todd is checking in too. Shalom from Greenfield. So David Todd is listening to it. So I just wanted to go ahead and throw those up. So
you betcha.
Continue on.
You bet. So the big question is the national debt unconstitutional? And is it okay? It's a form of stealing from our children and our grandchildren, isn't it? So we ask the question, is it unconstitutional? And so if you look at the preamble of our Constitution, it says that it promises to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, or our children and our grandchildren, our descendants. And rather than securing the blessings of liberty, though, our national debt really takes away their liberties and kind of enslaves them to the debt that we're leaving them. And that's been left to us. I mean, let's face it, it's been going on for a while now, right? The debt that's piling up. So we are basically making the next generation indentured servants because of what we're spending today. And so if we looked at Article 4, I mentioned this earlier in our Constitution, it talks about a Republican form of government. But one of the ways that are one of the requirements of a Republican form of government is we have people who are voted in to represent us, and then we then represent that those people that we elect then represent that particular group of people, us, the American citizens. But in this case, it's like taxation without representation. We're taxing and throwing all this debt on our future generations, but they're not getting a say in it. When they're born, actually right now, and this is on the debt clock, when a U.S. citizen, a child is born, they owe $91,000 the second they come out of the womb, which is crazy. So that should not be happening. So our whole principles of self-government, we're kind of throwing out the window with our debt. So we've taken their right to vote on what they're going to do with the money. And so it's kind of the same as taxation without representation. And what did our presidents have to say? Both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both had some strong opinions against incurring national debt. Washington warned against ungenerously throwing upon posterity the burden which we ourselves ought to bear, us right now, instead of pushing it down the road. Jefferson also said that crushing debt will lead to revolution. And he said that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. So that gives you an idea. Our founding fathers were against it. They warned against it. Washington even used the word endanger all governments to get into this habit. So, and we see a lot of that. What's that?
I think the point that these people had in mind, and it seems really obvious to me, is that it is profoundly immoral for us to spend this money for our benefit and expect our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and all these future generations to pay it. It's constitutionally repugnant, and it's morally, it's wrong.
Right. Absolutely. And that they use those words too, immoral and things like that, because they knew better than that.
So they were even aware of it at the founding. I mean, they knew that this would not be a good thing to happen for us to create a national debt.
Yes. And so then the question really becomes, how do we fix this thing, right? Well, it's not. People say, well, that's a political question. Well, no, it's not really a political question, because the people today aren't representing our future generations anyway. So what do we need to do? I just had 3 things that Michael Ferris brought up in his chapter that I thought were great points. He said we need to elect leaders who are actually going to cut spending and quit spending money, hold their feet to the fire. They're passionate about reducing our debt. Second, we have to build a proper legal challenge to the constitutionality of our national debt. And then third, pursue amendment for against the debt and towards fiscal responsibility, which is what COS is all about. And none of us will leave a bunch of debt to our kids, like on purpose. I mean, typically as a U.S. citizen and as a believer, a follower of God and the Bible, I feel like I want to leave my kids with something. I think there's a verse in the Bible that says the righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. I love that, both spiritually and I think financially. So, So unless those things happen, we're just spiraling down, I feel like, and nobody's stopping it.
Yeah, Thomas has got another good comment here.
Yes.
Generation that makes the debt should pay the debt. That's, I think that's a very, very good comment. We got another one here from, this is from Susan and Rick Lyon. Rand Paul is talking about stupid stuff. Government is wasting money studying things that we know by common sense. Look at the $1,000 bills. The 1,000 bills proposed to Indiana legislature. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out here.
Well, and that's a really good point, because you look at some of the bills and some of the things they're trying to get money for, and I'm like, what planet are you on? Are you even like in this atmosphere? Like, we have so many other issues, and we're worried about doing a study on how many genders there are or things like that, like, if you want to study that on your own, go study it, but don't make our government pay for it. Our government should be involved in that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
All right. Anything else on your mind, Debbie?
No, I think I've said it all, but I'm sure I'll have a few things to add here and there as we go on.
Okay. All right. Well, Gary, based on what Debbie said, you want to comment on the national debt, the relationship to economic growth, and what?
Well, first I want to say I really appreciate the points that Debbie made about the Constitution and how it's simply wrong to create all this debt. And then, Dale, if you want to bring up this USA debt clock, I want to point out just a couple numbers on here. There's
okay, I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to try and give it a full screen so that we can see it here. And we should still be able to hear you talking. Go ahead.
Right. I will describe where to find some of these numbers. So in the very upper left, that 30 number, 30,498, that's what we think of, what we hear them talk about is the national debt, some $30 trillion. And what that consists of are treasury notes, treasury bonds, treasury bills. So I worked for years in commercial banking, and we participated in the auction and bought treasury notes, for example. And that's how the debt is created. The treasury issues notes, investors buy them, give that money to the government spends it, gives them a note that says, we'll pay you back this $1 million in 10 years. And every 6 months, you'll get an interest coupon based on what the interest rate on that coupon is. just as an example. So that is the national debt. If we scroll down just a little further, Dale, I want to bring up a number that's going to be down in the lower right part of the screen. And that number, just there at the bottom, not the extreme right, but it's 169,699 something. And if you look at the fine print, you'll see that says U.S. unfunded liabilities. And if you're not quick at math, let me tell you, that number is more than 5 times the national, so-called national debt. Those are unfunded liabilities that's money the government has promised to pay in the future for Social Security, Medicare, retirement benefits for military and federal employees, and other future obligations that there is no fund currently in existence to support those obligations. So when we say the national debt is 30 trillion, we're probably really talking about the tip of the iceberg that we can see, and the rest of that is sort of below the surface, and we don't see it, think about it. But we have a national debt that's far bigger than anybody realizes, or most people think about. Now, if we go back up to the upper left again, there's a couple lines there below where the national debt is, those numbers in green, and that's the federal debt to GDP ratio. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. You see, in 1960, it was 52%, about 53%. That's because we were still paying off a lot of debt that we incurred during World War II to fight that war. And there was a lot of money, particularly in 1950, it was huge, but we were paying it down rapidly. You can see by 1980, it was down to 34%. You go over to right now, it's 129%. And this number is the number people ought to be thinking about, because there have been economists that have studied this phenomena of what happens as the national debt grows. And it's been studied in other countries around the world that have gotten into debt problems. And what happens is when the debt gets larger than 100% of the GDP, it begins to depress the ability of the economy to grow. And so our future growth, not just next year, but every year, is depressed to some degree by the fact that we have a national debt that is way over 100% of our gross domestic product. And that doesn't even count the unfunded liabilities. So the debt not only has an effect on future generations in the sense that it's money they need to pay, but it's also depressing the ability of the economy to grow. And if we think about the economy might grow at 1% or 2%, or the long-term average has been around 3%, but as debt gets much bigger, it's probably going to be closer to 1%. And there's another well-known economist who won the Nobel Prize for really explaining the fact that when the economy grows at 1% or 2%, let's say, rather than 1%, that's not a 1% difference. It's 100% difference, because the growth occurs at the margin. So an economy that's growing twice as fast creates twice as many new jobs, twice the level of increased prosperity. And so the debt, this debt burden, actually is depressing the ability of our economy to grow in the future. And that's going to have effects not just next year, but every year until we get control of spending and start reducing the spending.
You know, Gary, I can remember so clearly in the early 2000s. Well, I guess it was around 2012, 13 or so when I started really paying attention to this and getting involved in Convention of States. I can remember economists warning, and I think we were at, I don't know, something like 80% of GDP. And I can remember economists warning, oh, if we ever get to 100% of GDP, we are really in trouble. We are really in trouble. Look at it now. We're
Wow.
Yes,
123%.
exactly. There's just a couple more numbers on this page I want to point out.
Okay.
If you look at the very upper right-hand corner, you'll see the payroll tax,
Yes.
$1.368 trillion. And then you go down below those debt to GDP figures, and you'll see the spending for Medicare. The four largest categories of spending are Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, national defense, and interest on the debt. And you will notice that the money coming in from the payroll tax is just a little bit greater than the money being paid out for Social Security. Well, that money, you've heard the government, officials talk about, goes into a lockbox. Well, let me tell you what that lockbox consists of. The cash goes in, the cash is immediately paid out and spent for other government spending, and the Treasury puts in an IOU saying, oh, we owe this lockbox X number of dollars. And you could see that the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which I think you'd probably agree are not really constitutional, they are more than 3 times the size of what we spend on national defense, which is something that the Constitution provides for. So that's enough about those numbers. I would encourage people to go to that. You can look at the line up there, usadebtclock.org. You can go to this and study it. There's all kinds of additional numbers we're not going to talk about, but you can learn an enormous amount about spending by studying this. And there's state debt clocks. There's a link there for state debt clocks and world debt clocks. And you can, one of the things you come to the realization is that government spending is completely out of control. And there's really no real constituency for cutting spending, which is why we need a constitutional means of putting limits on spending. And what that will do is it will force Congress to set priorities and say, we'll spend money on this, but we're not going to spend money on that. Right now, they simply just add anything that anybody seemingly wants to add to spending gets added, because there is no forced discipline of a limit on what government can spend.
Gary, you remember some time ago we had Senator Mike Braun on, and we interviewed him on, I think it was on one of our roundtable broadcasts. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the questions posed to him was, what difference what's one of the big differences he has experienced from his time in state government versus his time now in the federal government? And of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said when they were in state government, when they did budgets and worked on budgets, it was they were very much in tune with how much money they had to spend, how much revenue they had coming in. But he says in the federal government, they don't pay any attention to that. It's whatever is needed to be spent. There's no correlation to revenue coming in. So I thought that was a very stark observation on his part. So
definitely is.
This is, believe me, you can set and look at this debt clock, and you could spend hours on this. It's a wealth of information here, just a wealth of information.
Yeah, some of that on there, people can look up as the debt per capita, and more importantly, perhaps the debt per taxpayer.
Yeah,
because there's lots of people that really don't pay any taxes, and so that debt per taxpayer is it's a lot.
Yeah. Student loan debt, $1.764 trillion, almost 40,000 per student.
Per student on average, yeah.
Yeah. Credit card debt, just all sorts of information here. Very, very good.
You better take that screen away, Dale, or I'm going to start crying.
It is. It'll put you in a bad mood, won't it?
Yeah, then I'm going to get angry.
Very, very good. Anything else, Gary?
No, I think I've said enough about that.
You
You
got us
get the
all, you
point.
got us all to the point of tears here almost.
You get my drift, right?
Yes, yes. Well, folks, obviously, our country is facing a real dilemma here, and all the more reason, folks, for a convention of states to make something happen here. As I said, addressing our national debt is one of the pillars of our resolution calling for a convention of states, and that's to one of the pillars is to address our national debt. So all the more reason why we need to make this happen, because like you both have said, they're not going to, our federal government's not going to do this. They're not going to, we're going to have to force this to happen. And this is provided in the Constitution, and it's this kind of situation that it was put in the Constitution for us to take control and have some input on this. Let me see if we've got any more comments that we might want to take a look at here. Okay. Here's a new viewer, Moo. Indeed, debt responsibility is something we teach our children, but our government is exempt. So sad. How true. How true. Yeah. All right. Debbie, Gary, anything else before we shut down here?
I'm looking forward to hearing what Rick Lyon has to say.
All right. Okay. Thank you both for coming on tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
All right, folks. I promised Rick Lyon we would get to his contribution, and I'm going to do that right now. So here we go with the Lion Truth.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Lyon. I believe this country is headed down two paths, and neither is good. The path to socialism, where the government controls everything and everybody, or the path to revolution, where we, the people, get fed up with tyranny and our freedoms are taken back by force. I sincerely believe that Convention of States and Article 5 of the Constitution are the only peaceful, legal, and legitimate way to prevent either of these two outcomes. We once talked about saving freedom and the republic for our grandchildren and future generations, but those days are gone. Now we must save it for ourselves. It is our generation's turn to answer the call of freedom. And we may not be fighting on the beaches of Normandy, but our battles are no less important. By not using our right to self-govern, by not participating in government by the people, by trusting our future to career politicians and trusting the media to keep an eye on things, the wolf of socialism has found its way into our homes, and now we are cornered and our liberty is wounded. Most of us would go quietly to our fate, lamenting, but what can I do? However, many Americans won't. With socialism, the government is God. Obedience is the religion. China is murdering Uyghurs for their beliefs. They are putting Muslims in prison camps, and ironically, the Taliban just sold its soul to the Chinese Communist Party. Don't believe that that can't happen here. Christians are persecuted here in this country where freedom of speech and freedom of religion are the bedrocks of our government. I believe that what we are experiencing today is actually a war on religion, and I am here with Convention of States to help stop that. America was created because of our desire for religious liberty, freedom to choose to worship as we believe, not the way some king requires us to believe. Religion in all its various flavors is fundamental to civilization because it gives value to every human life as a child of God. An ideal social order is that in which every man loves his neighbor as he loves himself. And when we value ourselves and each other, we're nicer to each other. And we become moral, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who foster peace on earth, goodwill, and prosperity for all. And no government of any kind can mandate that. But today, our own government is waging a war on the very thing that put them in power: our faith in God, love of country, and loyalty to family. The media demeans these values, and our religious institutions fail to stand up for them. We need new leaders, spiritual men and women who are devoted to the spiritual regeneration of mankind, who will supply the leadership and inspiration necessary for the social, moral, economic, and political uplifting of this world. All that is required for evil to succeed is that good people do nothing. I believe that only through Convention of States, that we, an army of grassroots citizen activists, working legally and peacefully through Article 5 of the Constitution, can reclaim our right to government by the people and our right to worship as we choose, when we choose, and where we choose. Our founding fathers with Article 5 gave us the power to rein in our runaway government. But the thing about freedom is this: use it or lose it. And that is the lion truth. Thank you.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that. That's Rick Lyon. Rick is our state events coordinator, and I think Rick does a really good job on that. So we'll have more contributions by Rick in the future. So, well, do we need to wrap things up here this evening? Let me. I promised I would put this email address on again. So if you have any comments or questions after the broadcast, feel free to give us an email at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. So, got a quick comment here from, okay. Got another comment here from Cheryl Schottmeyer, one of our region captains. Spot on, Rick. She really agreed with that, Rick. And Rick says thanks. Okay, so good one tonight. Good one tonight. Okay. Also wanted to point out one more time our national website, conventionofstates.com, and the next roundtable will be coming up June 27th. So you want to be sure and put that on your calendar to watch. 7 p.m. Eastern Time, June 27th. So I just want to leave you with one last concept. This is an acronym that one of our district captains came up with not too long ago. GOTC. That stands for Get Off the Couch. And that is pertains. It's so appropriate. So many of us decided to get off the couch and do something. And when we did that, we joined Convention of States. So that's that's something to take note of, folks. If you're one of those people sitting on the couch thinking I need to do something, well, get off that couch and join Convention of States. So that's a wrap for tonight, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Be with us again next Monday. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a state director from Arizona be as our guest, going to be talking about how to become a constitutional coach. So with that said, good night, everyone. Have a good evening. Good night.